A few weeks back, on a typical Thursday morning, I found myself knee-deep in the chaos of our daily routine, getting the kids ready for school at 7:30. In the middle of all this, the phone rang, piercing through the noise. Curious, I glanced at the caller ID, noticing an unfamiliar area code, which made me even more intrigued. "Hello?" I answered cautiously, pressing the phone to my ear. To my surprise, it was my wife, Claire, on the other end. I couldn't help but wonder why she was calling so early, especially since we had just spoken the night before. Claire works for a small marketing firm, and usually, our conversations are brief and to the point during the day. Her call immediately caught my attention. I'm the one who stays home, looking after the kids while I run my own work from home. Meanwhile, Claire is constantly on the go, working at a printing company downtown. We make it work, though, balancing our different schedules. We live in a comfortable 4-bedroom home with a pool, and while life's busy, we manage pretty well. We've got a good group of friends, and overall, life's been treating us decently. But Claire sounded worried on the phone. "Last night, when I went down to the hotel lobby to grab a newspaper, my purse got stolen," she said, her voice trembling a little. "Can you cancel our credit cards as soon as possible and request new ones? I've already informed my boss, Joy, and she's going to send me new company cards overnight. She's also transferring some money to hold me over for the next few days." I couldn't help but ask, "How did it happen? You're usually so careful." "Honestly, I was distracted," she admitted, sounding a bit ashamed. "I left my purse on the counter when I went to grab some reading material. When I came back, it was gone. The cashier said she was helping someone else at the time and didn't see anything. My driver's license was in there too, but the hotel staff is checking the dumpsters just in case." "Don't worry," I reassured her. "I'll take care of the credit cards. It could have happened to anyone." Despite her shaky voice, she tried to calm down. "Thanks. I just hope there aren't too many other costs." The most cash I had in there was around $1,200. Thankfully, I still have most of my makeup for the presentation later. We talked briefly about the kids before I ended the call, promising to take care of everything. A few weeks later, after handling the credit card cancellations and moving on with life, I stumbled across something unexpected. I had found a statement from Claire's Fidelity account, where she managed an investment fund from her parents' inheritance. It was a private thing she never talked much about. I respected her privacy, but while looking for our home insurance papers, I found a folder containing a few of her statements. I knew her inheritance had been about $350,000, but to my surprise, the balance had grown to over $400,000. Something else caught my eye, though. About 6 weeks ago, there was a $3,000 withdrawal from her money market account. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate a bit further. That's when I discovered she had written a check to a local jewelry store just days after the purse incident. I couldn't help but wonder, what had she bought? She never mentioned buying anything for me, and I hadn't heard her talking about any gifts for someone else. Could she have bought something for her brother? But even that didn't make much sense. With questions swirling in my head, I went to the computer and looked up the jewelry store. Jotting down their phone number, I picked up the phone and called. A friendly woman answered, asking how she could assist me. "I'm calling about a purchase made by my wife recently. We're having a little issue, and I was wondering if the item came with any sort of warranty," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. After a few moments, she found the transaction and asked, "What seems to be the issue with the rings?" "Rings?" I froze for a moment, wondering what Claire could have possibly bought. "Oh, yes," the woman continued, "I remember this sale quite well." The woman on the phone continued, "Your wife seemed quite distressed when she came in, mentioning that her wedding and engagement rings had been stolen. She wanted to replace them, and it wasn't easy to find the right match. She used her company's credit card as a placeholder and later mailed us a check to cover the cost. Now that you've mentioned the issue with the rings, I just want to assure you that we offer a 90-day warranty in case of any problems. Could it be that the diamond setting came loose? I paused, trying to make sense of it all. Claire had never told me she lost her wedding and engagement rings. She had only mentioned that her purse was stolen. It didn't add up. Thanks for letting me know, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll need to discuss this with my wife before moving forward. I hung up the phone, feeling more bewildered than ever. Why would Claire have been carrying her wedding and engagement rings in her purse? They should have been on her finger, unless, for some reason, she didn't want to appear married while she was away. I couldn't think of any professional reason she'd need to hide her marital status. But socially? That's where my mind started to drift into darker thoughts. Was she trying to pass herself off as single during these trips? The idea of her even considering an affair hit me hard, making my stomach turn. We'd been married for over a decade, blessed with 2 kids, Jeremy, 8, and Melissa, 6. I always believed we had a perfect family, and that our marriage was solid. Sure, she traveled for work once a month, but I trusted her completely, never questioning where she went or who she was with during those trips. But now, everything seemed different. If she had lost the rings while dancing with someone else, did that mean she was trying to replace them to cover it up? It all felt like a cover-up, especially since the replacements were almost identical to the originals. I had bought those rings with my modest earnings, so they weren't extravagant. It wouldn't have cost much to recreate them. Why hadn't she filed an insurance claim? I would have known if she had. The more I thought about it, the more things didn't sit right. If the purse was truly stolen at the hotel, she should have filed a police report. Yet, I hadn't heard a word about that. So, I called the hotel, hoping to dig deeper. To my surprise, they confirmed they had a report on file from the night Claire said her purse was stolen. I asked them to send it over. When the fax arrived, I read the report carefully. It was written and signed by Claire herself. According to the statement, she had been dancing in the hotel ballroom, leaving her purse at the table, and when she returned, it was gone. Strangely, Claire mentioned that she didn't want to involve the police, which immediately raised a red flag for me. As I processed this, my mind raced, trying to piece together what I had just uncovered. Not only had she lied about the rings, but she had also fabricated a story about shoplifting her purse. Could there be a different explanation? My brain kept cycling through possibilities, but nothing good came to mind. One thing became painfully clear: those rings were in her purse while she was dancing with another man. And this wasn't just some random event from weeks ago. Claire was gearing up for another business trip soon. I realized I needed to know more about these trips. What was she doing in the evenings when she was away from home? If she had strayed, maybe losing the rings had shocked her into rethinking her choices. But if I discovered that she had been unfaithful, I wasn't sure what would happen next. I dreaded the thought of divorce, especially with the kids in the middle. Claire was an excellent mother, but the idea of her having custody while constantly traveling for work made me uneasy. My mind swirled with unanswered questions. What other signs could reveal the truth about her behavior during those trips? Had she been reckless, putting herself and our family at risk? My thoughts spiraled. Could there be a chance she had brought something home, like an infection or, worse, a pregnancy? I knew I had to dig deeper before I could confront her. Whatever I found out would determine the future of our marriage, for better or worse. After our second child was born, I had a vasectomy, making pregnancy impossible. But if Claire was seeing other men, she couldn't rely on them to be prepared, which meant she must have been carrying protection of her own. That left me wondering, where would she keep it? Storing it at our house or in the car didn't make sense. Her office seemed the most likely place. But she probably took it with her on business trips, tucked away in the same large briefcase she used to transport her work papers, laptop, and presentation materials. Claire had a habit of bringing her briefcase home the night before an early morning flight, packing it into her suitcase before heading to the airport. I realized that if I wanted to search through it, that would be my chance. I needed to stay calm, act as if everything was normal, and wait for the right moment. When the kids got home from school, I busied myself with chores to keep my mind occupied, but the lingering suspicion of Claire's infidelity gnawed at me. When she came home from work, I was in the middle of cleaning up after spilling a dish of beans all over the kitchen floor. The chaos of managing the mess and keeping the kids on track left me a bit disheveled, but Claire didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. After we cleaned up, I greeted her with a quick kiss on the cheek, and we sat down for dinner like we always did. As we ate, I casually brought up her upcoming trip. "So, you're heading out again in a couple of days?" I asked, hoping to keep the conversation light. "Yeah," she sighed. "Same routine, different city. I'm not really looking forward to it." Sensing an opportunity to dig deeper, I said, "If you're not enjoying it, have you thought about switching to a different role? You've been with the company long enough to know the ins and outs. I'm sure you could transition to something more stationary." She mentioned that she wanted to gain more experience before settling into a desk job, but I appealed to her in a different way. "The kids and I really miss you when you're gone," I said, hoping to tug at her sense of guilt. "I miss you all too," she replied softly, sounding genuine. Trying to keep the conversation going, I asked, "Where are you headed this time? Will you be leaving in the morning? Maybe we could spend a little time together before you go." I held her gaze, making sure to appear casual, but my stomach was tight with nerves. As we talked, I noticed that she seemed to be eating without much interest. Maybe she was feeling the same unease I was, or perhaps my suspicions were completely off base. Still, I couldn't shake the urge to search her briefcase. It might hold the answers I needed. "I'm just going to Denton this time," she said. "I leave tomorrow morning at 7:30 and will be back by Friday." She gave me a playful wink, adding, "I need something to keep me going until then." I smiled back, doing my best to maintain the normality. To my surprise, she blushed a little at my response. The fact that she mentioned bringing her briefcase home suggested that she wouldn't stop by the office before her flight. That meant it would be in the car, giving me a chance to check it out. That evening, Claire returned home in high spirits, pulling into the garage and parking beside my car. She seemed excited, which left me wondering if it was because of our earlier conversation or something else entirely. As she walked inside, I noticed she didn't bring her briefcase in with her. Assuming it was still in the car, I kept my eye on the situation while preparing dinner. After we finished eating, she casually asked, "Would you mind grabbing my suitcase from the garage?" "Sure, no problem," I replied, making sure not to let any hint of suspicion show. "Are you all set for the trip?" she asked, as if trying to reassure me that everything was normal. "Oh yeah," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Just a routine trip, right?" Her briefcase was still in the car, and I knew that tomorrow morning would be my chance. If there was anything in there that could reveal the truth about her faithfulness, I would find it. I decided to pack an overnight bag with just the essentials, trying to keep things as normal as possible. "Do you have any plans while you're away?" I asked, pretending everything was fine. "No, nothing special," Claire replied, her voice casual. "The kids and I will stick to our usual routine during the week. Maybe we can plan something fun for the weekend when I'm back." "Sounds like a plan," I responded, keeping my tone upbeat. After dinner, she helped clear the table and load the dishwasher, just like always. Once we were done, she headed to the bedroom to pack for her trip, while I went out to the garage to grab her suitcase. As I opened her car door, I noticed the briefcase wasn't inside, leading me to believe she had stashed it in the trunk. That was what I had expected, so I had already thought of a way to get my hands on it later that evening. When I returned to the bedroom with her suitcase, I casually asked, "Hey, do you know where the car keys are? Looks like my tire is losing air again. I was thinking about taking it to Jerry, he can fix it real quick." She seemed puzzled for a moment but then handed me the keys from her purse. "Can't you just use the spare tire?" she suggested. Taking a firm stance, I replied, "Sure, but the spare's for emergencies. We've got time to fix it properly, and I think that's the better way to go." Before she could change her mind, I hurried back to the garage, got into her car, and drove over to Jerry's gas station. Jerry had been a friend since high school, and he could sense when something wasn't right. "What's up, man?" Jerry asked, opening the bay door for me. "Just a small issue with the tire," I said, pulling the car in. "But I also needed a little time to check something else." Jerry's eyes narrowed. "Trouble at home?" "Maybe," I admitted quietly, opening the trunk and pulling out Claire's briefcase. I placed it on a workbench and unlocked it. Jerry saw what I was doing but, sensing I needed some privacy, simply said, "I'll be in the shop if you need me." He left me alone to search the briefcase. I took my time, careful not to disturb anything. My hands fumbled through the pockets until I found it, an open package of contraceptives, with 3 missing. My heart sank. It was as if every suspicion, every doubt, had just been confirmed in one swift moment. I stood there for a while, letting it sink in, then carefully placed the package back where I found it and closed the briefcase. When Jerry returned, he could see the look on my face. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said, my voice heavy with sadness and disappointment. "I did." Jerry didn't press for details. "Want me to check that tire pressure for you while you hang out a bit?" he offered. "Yeah, that'd be good," I said, grateful for his understanding. After he finished, I drove the car out of the bay, stopping briefly at a gas station to fill the tank. I wasn't sure when, or if, I'd ever do that for her again. My mind was spinning with gratitude for Jerry's support, but also with a deepening sense of dread about what lay ahead. By the time I pulled into our garage, a darkness had settled over me. The betrayal was like a weight, pressing down harder with every minute. How could she do this to our marriage? To our kids? To me? I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but in that moment, I knew I had to focus on what came next. I needed to protect the kids and secure custody. Claire might have been unfaithful, but she was still a good mother, and they deserved to have her in their lives, even if it was just during visitation. When I walked back into the house, I called out, "All set." It was just a minor issue, nothing serious. "Thanks," she said, still avoiding eye contact. Her nonchalance stung, but I managed to keep myself together. Seeking some relief, I grabbed a beer from the kitchen and sat with the kids, who were glued to a TV show. About half an hour later, Claire came in and sat beside me on the couch. By then, my emotions had settled a bit, but the sadness was still there, like a deep ache. I knew this family, our family, was on borrowed time. To my surprise, Claire snuggled up beside me, whispering in my ear, "Are you ready for tonight?" I took a sip of my beer, trying to hide the turmoil inside. "I think so," I said, feigning a stomach ache as an excuse. "But I'm not feeling too great." She looked at me with concern. "Oh, that's too bad, honey," she said softly, holding me closer, completely unaware that everything was about to change. "I love you," she said softly, and instinctively, I put my arm around her, though my heart was torn. Despite everything, her betrayal, there was still a lingering connection between us. I couldn't help but wonder why she did it. Was she searching for excitement, or did she feel a void I couldn't fill? I might never fully understand, but what was clear was how deeply my trust had been shattered. That night, we put the kids to bed together, as usual. Watching her kiss our children goodnight, knowing she'd be gone by morning, weighed heavily on me. The kids had grown used to her frequent trips, so they showed little concern. That night, we made love, but it felt hollow, lacking the intimacy we once shared. Claire noticed my tension. "Is your stomach still bothering you?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I nodded. Yeah, but I'll be fine, I said, hoping she would somehow choose us, our family, our marriage, over this trip. Desperately, I asked, do you really have to go on this trip? I wished this was all just a nightmare that would disappear in the morning, but she sighed and replied, I'm sorry, honey, but I really need to go. I'll try to wrap things up quickly and be back before you know it. I'm looking forward to the weekend with all of you. My heart sank. All right, I said quietly, you should get some rest. You've got an early morning flight. She nodded, heading to the shower. I'll take a shower now so I won't have to rush in the morning, she said. Okay, I replied. Once she stepped into the bathroom, an impulse I couldn't suppress took over. I walked to her suitcase and unzipped it. At first, everything seemed normal, business attire and the usual travel essentials. But beneath those, I found something that made my heart skip a beat, seductive lingerie and the small black cocktail dress she always looked stunning in. I gently placed everything back as I found it, zipped the suitcase, and returned to bed, feeling sick to my core. I didn't sleep that night. When I heard Claire stirring around 5 a.m., I remained in bed, choosing not to say goodbye as I usually did. I felt exhausted and empty. She bent down and kissed my cheek before heading out. Still not feeling well? She asked, her voice soft and caring. I nodded, struggling to express the storm of emotions inside me. As the garage door closed behind her, I finally rose from bed and headed to the shower, the hot water doing little to ease the tension building inside me. The day ahead felt like an uphill battle I wasn't ready to face. After getting the kids off to school and forcing down a quick breakfast, I turned to the yellow pages, searching for a private investigator. I wanted an agency with a national presence, preferably one that operated in Denton, where Claire was headed. After calling a few places, I found one with an office in her destination. I set up a meeting for later that morning, hoping they could help me get the answers I needed. Next, I called a divorce attorney. A friend had recommended a lawyer he trusted, so I dialed his number and arranged an afternoon appointment. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I needed to prepare for whatever was coming. At the investigator's office, I laid out my suspicions. They assured me they would surveil Claire during her trip and provide a detailed report, along with any photos they could gather. I handed over a photo of her and gave them the details of her flight and travel plans. They promised to send updates through their office in Denton and have a full report ready by Monday morning. I paid a substantial upfront fee to secure their services. While they couldn't guarantee incriminating photos, they said they'd do their best to get as much evidence as possible. I accepted that. That afternoon, I met with the lawyer. The meeting went as expected. He explained that in our state, divorce followed a no-fault principle, meaning I wouldn't need to prove Claire's infidelity to proceed. However, as the primary caregiver for our children, would likely be awarded custody. He also explained that Claire would be granted visitation rights, as was typical. Our assets, including property, would be divided evenly, but alimony wouldn't be necessary since our incomes were similar. Since I would be the one with custody, Claire would be obligated to pay child support. As for her inheritance, I made it clear that I didn't care about that. All I wanted was to make sure the children were taken care of. I instructed the lawyer to prepare the necessary divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences. They would be delivered to Claire on Monday, right after she returned from her trip. I also asked Claire to agree to vacate our house immediately after the divorce. The lawyer confirmed that, as the children's guardian, I had the right to make this request. It was also decided that when the kids turned 18, we would sell the house and split the proceeds evenly. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt an odd sense of relief. It was clear that life would move forward for me and the kids, while Claire would have to face the consequences of her actions. At that moment, I didn't rush to make changes regarding our finances, insurance, or other legal matters. I figured I had enough time to deal with those after serving her the divorce papers. Given the size of her inheritance, I knew she wouldn't be too worried about our joint savings. That Friday afternoon, I was home to greet the kids as they got off the bus. When Claire returned later that day, I kindly offered to take care of her laundry, but she smiled and politely declined, saying she would handle it herself. I couldn't help but smirk a little, knowing exactly why she preferred to manage her laundry. She had to keep her affairs hidden, and any evidence could be damning. Later, as we lay in bed, Claire expressed concern about my ongoing stomach issues and urged me to see a doctor. "It's been going on too long," she said, her voice filled with worry. I playfully told her that a friend had recommended a new medication, and I planned to try it to deal with the problem. I added, "Hopefully, it'll work, and I'll be back to my old self in no time." We embraced, and she whispered how much she missed me. It was bittersweet, knowing she was hiding so much from me. Monday came, and after the kids left for school and Claire headed to work, I received a call from the private detective agency. They informed me that the report was ready, and I told them I'd be there shortly. Within half an hour, I was sitting in the office, going over the details with the office manager. "The report was faxed from Denton this morning," he explained. "I haven't had time to read through it all, but from what I've seen, it looks pretty incriminating." He handed me a copy of the report, and I began to read. The subject was identified as Claire Barton. According to the surveillance records, they began tracking her at 5:17 p.m. on Wednesday, June 16, in the lobby of the Denton Marriott Hotel. Her identity was confirmed by comparing a photo from a previous investigation. To further verify her identity, the report noted she was wearing a company badge, confirming it was her. She was also carrying a briefcase, as usual, when she entered the hotel's elevator. At 5:23 p.m., she was observed arriving at room 414, alone. A photograph labeled Exhibit 1A showed her in professional attire, still wearing her wedding rings, before entering the room. It was clear the photo had been taken discreetly, probably with a phone camera. The report detailed that at 6:31 p.m., Claire left her room, heading for the elevator. She was no longer dressed in her work clothes. Instead, she wore a small black cocktail dress paired with high heels, the same outfit I had discovered in her suitcase days earlier. Around her neck was the necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary. But what caught my eye immediately was the absence of her wedding rings. In the photograph, labeled Exhibit 1B, it was obvious, her left hand was bare. At 8:51 p.m., Claire was seen at a restaurant, sitting in a booth with a man. Another photo, labeled Exhibit 1D, captured them in a tight embrace, sharing a passionate kiss. The intensity of their connection was undeniable. They left the restaurant together, heading back to the hotel. The final photograph, Exhibit 1E, showed them entering the elevator, their hands entwined, and heading up to Claire's floor. The report made it painfully clear what I had suspected. Claire wasn't just traveling for work, she was meeting this man, betraying everything we had built together. My worst fears were now confirmed. I sat there in the office, holding the report, the weight of it almost unbearable. The detective agency had done their job, and now it was up to me to decide the next steps. As I left their office, the reality of the situation sank in. I had the proof I needed, and soon, Claire would have to face the consequences of her actions. Claire and the man entered her room, specifically room 414. In the image, Claire appeared slightly intoxicated, but undeniably pleased with how her evening had unfolded. At 11:13 p.m., the man exited Claire's room and left the hotel. The report included the license plate number of a vehicle registered to Alexander B. Tate, who lived on Elia Drive in Denton. What struck me the hardest was learning that Tate was married and had 2 young children of his own. As I continued reading the report, my heart sank even further. The next night, Claire had repeated her actions with a different man. This wasn't just a one-time mistake, it was a pattern. The report, signed by the investigator, detailed everything, confirming that my wife was leading a double life while away from home. The betrayal far exceeded anything I had imagined. Even losing her wedding rings hadn't stopped her from being reckless. After settling the bill with the detective, I thanked them for their work and made sure to get 2 extra copies of the report, which were saved on a CD for safekeeping. When I got back home, I wasted no time. I immediately called my divorce attorney, asking about the status of the papers. The attorney confirmed that they were ready, waiting to be filed. Without hesitation, I instructed them to move forward with the filing, and I specifically requested that the papers be served to Claire at her workplace. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions in the most public way possible. The attorney assured me that it could be arranged, and I provided her workplace address. I knew this would be a blow to her, but after what she'd done, it felt like a justified form of revenge. That night, there was no warmth between us. Claire seemed to sense that something was off, perhaps suspecting that I had discovered her betrayal. Though she didn't voice her concerns directly, I could tell she was anxious, offering vague comments about my health and hoping I'd feel better soon. She even seemed more reserved than usual, but I chose to ignore it. The next morning, I woke up early after a restless night. I busied myself on the computer until I heard the kids getting up, then I went to the kitchen to make breakfast. After eating, Claire got ready to leave for work. She came to me, expecting the usual hug and kiss goodbye, but I gave her a half-hearted embrace, signaling that she should hurry up and go. I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, as if she knew something was coming. When I closed the door behind her, I saw tears welling up in her eyes as she whispered, "I love you." As soon as she left, an overwhelming sadness washed over me. I wanted to cry, but I forced myself to hold it together for the kids. They needed me more than ever. I helped them get ready for school, knowing that the life we once knew was falling apart. Later that morning, around 10:45, the phone rang. Claire's workplace appeared on the caller ID. I answered but said nothing. After a brief pause, Claire's voice came through, trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered before the line went silent. I didn't respond. That night, Claire didn't come home, and I wondered if she was still caught up in her deceitful games, uncaring about her family. While I felt justified in my anger, I also questioned whether I had been too harsh. The kids, disheartened by their mother's absence, asked where she was, and to lift their spirits, I took them to McDonald's for dinner. By the time we got home, they were exhausted and went straight to bed. The next morning, Claire called with a request. "Honey, can I come home to pack my things? Can we talk?" For a brief moment, guilt tugged at me, but it quickly dissipated. Calmly, I replied, "You can come by between 9 and noon. The kids and I won't be here." I made it clear that if she wanted to talk, it would be in my lawyer's office, and only after she signed and notarized the divorce papers. "Then he'll hear whatever you have to say." There was a sob on the other end before Claire said, "Good." The line went dead once again. Claire signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later, our marriage officially ended. In the aftermath, I learned that she had become pregnant during her affair. She had tried to conceal it, but contraception had failed her, and she was nearing the end of her childbearing years. Even if I hadn't found out about her infidelity through the lost rings, the truth would have come out eventually. There were rumors that she had started dating again. If she ever got close to remarrying, I've thought about warning her future husband about her unfaithfulness. It seems unnecessary for her to deceive and hurt someone else the way she hurt me. But for now, I'm content knowing that I did what was necessary to protect my children and move on with my life. As I shared my thoughts with Claire, she begged me to reconsider the divorce, speaking about how hard it was not to have full access to the children. I listened, but my mind was made up. I explained that the trust between us was broken beyond repair. She told me that she had been seeing a psychologist who diagnosed her with nymphomania and assured me that her impulses were now under control. But despite her promises, it wasn't enough. I couldn't forget that she hadn't sought help earlier. If she had been more proactive in addressing her issues, maybe things wouldn't have spiraled out of control the way they did. I left the lawyer's office that day with her still in tears, but my decision remained firm. A few weeks later, I reconnected with an old school friend who works at a nightclub. He mentioned seeing Claire there on several weekends, accompanied by different men and acting provocatively. It hurt to hear that, knowing that she was still making reckless choices, despite everything. I was also troubled by the thought that our children had such an irresponsible mother. Perhaps she never truly recovered from her condition. Not long after, one of Claire's friends reached out to tell me that her health had declined. She had contracted herpes and was struggling, still living a promiscuous lifestyle. Although I felt some sympathy for her situation, I made it clear that I couldn't help her. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. On a more positive note, I had started dating again, and I think I've found someone special. She's around my age and, like me, has been through a painful divorce due to infidelity. I admire her strength and resilience, qualities that resonate with me after everything I've been through. Best of all, my children seem to like her too. It feels like a fresh start, and I'm finally moving on with my life. I can see a future with this woman, and it seems like a matter of time before I consider taking our relationship to the next level. After all the heartache, I'm ready to build something new.